In this video of our series on Colonial Williamsburg, we visit the blacksmith shop and the Colonial Capitol building, bringing back memories of high school, believe it or not. I'm Steve.
I'm Nancy, and together we are living our dream. Our goal, to travel the U.S. and Canada,
while spreading the messages taught to us by our paps of
keep smiling, be kind,
and be happy. Join us on our travels by subscribing to our channel as we continue our great adventure. Yep.
That's what you need, so you can have... Oh, I'm done.
No, not really.
Do you see Max
Oh,
in that?
that'd be great. Yeah.
I didn't know if that was like an ever at all in the works. Which one?
First, let's visit the blacksmith shop. So this seems to be the one that's based in town.
Repair work is the biggest category of work that we're dealing with, but we're custom making stuff too. Stuff here on the tables give you an idea of some of the more common categories of work that we're dealing with for the civilian population. So most people around here farm for a living, so you tend to have a lot of gardening, farming tools on the end, like you have on the end there, hoes, rakes, axes for clearing land. There's a plow on the floor here that needs to be repaired. Then think about stuff you use every day in your life: kitchen implements, fireplace equipment, building hardware, tools of your trade. Those are some of the common things that we're doing all the time. I mean, some of these things were commercially made and you can buy them in the store. So some things I don't have to make because of that reason. The nails falls under that category.
Oh, okay.
Typically. The exception to that is when we go to war with England. So now we're cut off from who's sending that stuff. We're not sending our raw materials over there because we're at war with them. So the owner of this shop did employ 8 or 9 boys during the war to make nails. By this time period, we're the 3rd largest maker of iron in the world. It's the 2nd largest export out of the country. So when we're not importing goods from England during the Revolutionary War, we're not sending them iron. We're not sending them
I didn't realize
timber.
that. So where did most of that come from? Pennsylvania or?
Every colony except for Georgia processing iron.
Wow.
And Georgia gets into eventually this later. But yeah, here in Virginia, there's about a dozen furnaces in the 18th century that were processing. The 4 closest one was about 25 or 30 miles to the west of us. And the owner of that furnace has a store across the street. So you could literally go across the street and it would show up.
When I was a senior in high school, I was fortunate enough to make a trip to Colonial Williamsburg for a debate tournament. Only 2 teams from each state were invited, and I was lucky enough to be one of the 2 teams representing Texas. I know we were invited due to the respect others had for our debate coach, more than our talents probably, but we held our own. While my partner and I did okay, we didn't make it to the finals, which were held in the main chamber of the Colonial Capitol. That event cemented my love of this building and the entire area from that point on.
Any government that has ever existed since man has existed really only has ever done 2 major things. You know, they all go about it different ways, but there's only 2 things that they really accomplish. They collect taxes, and they decide what to do with that tax money. That's the function of the government. So if we go back to the original definition of the word government in the English language, might be surprised to find that its original definition is that of a money management system. That's all it is. All right? It's no coincidence, by the way, that you guys are in the capital. It actually does come from the root word capital, it's in money. All right? So managing the tax system, that's what Virginia had in their charter from the very beginning that they would do for themselves. But the men in this room, the elected officials, the House of Burgesses, are the people that were selected to make those decisions. So that is your government here in Virginia. Now, it works in here pretty much the same way that it works in House of Commons in British Parliament. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that on TV. A big green room like this with a bunch of old English guys yelling at each other. That's essentially how it worked back in the 18th century. You have your Speaker of the House over here, who's really more or less a tiebreaker than anything else. He's not really in charge, per se. The person who's really in charge is the clerk. That's you. All right? Now, you're the same clerk from the other side. You're in charge of the highest court in Virginia, and you're in charge of how the legislature does their procedures. All right? Making you a pretty important guy, all right? What's going to happen is they're going to finish their legislation upstairs. They're going to present it to you. You're going to read it out to the crowd, and they're going to fight amongst themselves. And when I say that, I'm not kidding. You're going to see them throwing wads of paper, insulting each other's mothers, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, right? Back in 1774, we had Thomas Jefferson in here, Patrick Henry, George Washington, George Mason, all these guys here at the same time. I know that might sound impressive, but you have to keep in mind that they weren't famous back then. All right. And also, they're not the only ones here. Around that time, we've got close to 155 members in here.
Wow.
Right. Now, in 1774, all those guys were working together on a project with some of the members of the governor's council on the other side. They're going to meet up in the joint council chamber, that big room in the middle. And they're going to start talking about the Stamp Act. Okay, there's the tax, right? Didn't I just tell you that the Crown Prince was tax colonies? Well, we know that they did. It happens after the French and Indian War. King George II over here in this painting was on the throne at the time, and he claimed divine providence just like everybody else in Europe did. So he's got to fight everybody in Europe for a big land grab that they're having over here, which you essentially have as a big world war that's happening on this continent, and it bankrupts Great Britain. So they're broke, right? They're not picking on the colonies when they start taxing them. They're taxing everybody in the British Empire. They're not even taxing individual people. Nobody is knocking on your door asking you to give them money for any tea that you have in house in the rooms. These taxes are being levied on merchant companies, on shipping industry, corporations. When's the last time you ever heard of a corporation paying its taxes, right? Doesn't happen a whole lot now, didn't happen a whole lot then either. So basically, they're not even seeing a good return from these taxes, but they're trying to be fair, because after all, the people that live in these colonies, they're not colonists, they're British citizens. And they're treated as such. They don't want to be a burden on their own people. Here's the problem, though. When they do that, they're saying that all the men in this room that were elected to make those decisions aren't allowed to make that decision anymore. They were told to go home. Taxation without. That's exactly what that means. This one's called the General Court. All right. Now, it's not called the General Court because it's the highest court of Virginia. It is the highest court of Virginia. It's called the General Court because it handles every aspect of English common law. So any type of trial they can have in a British courtroom can happen here. That's technically true of every courthouse in the British Empire, including the local county courthouse down the street. But as that name implies, local county courthouse, they're going to focus a lot more on local issues. All right, so you're going to see a lot more misdemeanor trials there: taxes, fees, fines, civil cases. The kinds of things that you might think of as the little stuff, I guarantee you, if you're on the receiving end of that, it's not going to seem so little, right? But they're going to handle the bigger cases too. So you're going to see felony cases tried down there. Now, in those felony cases, typically the people on trial are going to be individuals that are considered not free. So if you have an enslaved person that's charged with a felony crime, they get their day in court, it'll just be a local county courthouse like that one. They have one of those in every county in Virginia at that particular time. This one, on the other hand, is at the Capitol. What kind of crimes do we going to focus on at the Capitol? Now, the crimes good, you picked up on the context clue. A lot of people have to miss that. Right? So what that's going to mean to you is felony trials against individuals that are considered free. They got to cover all of Virginia to make that happen. So that's going to include what we think of as Virginia today, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, a lot of southern Canada too. That's all Virginia back in the 18th century. If you're charged with a felony anywhere in that territory, you're going to be dragged from wherever you are here in Williamsburg to this very courtroom to stand trial.
Oh, but you wouldn't get in there to see the table at that time.
So hopefully everybody got a chance to see this chamber over here on this side, the governor's council chamber. Governor's council is kind of like the Senate. The difference is that they're actually meeting with the royal governor when they make their decisions. But that's a committee room. Okay, so what she just saw is a room very similar to this one with a green table, a bunch of papers on it, right? We talked about this side over here. Governor's council is kind of like the Senate, but the people that meet over there are all elected officials. That's those burgesses I was telling you about, all right? So they're going to meet in that room. They'll vote on that, okay? And then that doesn't take very long either, especially if you compare it to how Congress works today. All right, then they're going to bring that legislation up. They'll present it to the governor and his council in the other room. His council is going to tell the governor what they think. He's going to have the final word on passing or vetoing the legislation. So if all these guys say yes and all these guys say yes, he can still say no. Sound familiar? Now, if the governor says yes and passes the legislation, it becomes a law immediately. If he says no and vetoes it, it's not going away forever. All right, he's just basically saying to them, hey guys, I read through this. It doesn't suit me the way that it is right now, so I can't sign it under these conditions. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand it back to you. If you guys want to go back and rewrite this, maybe change X, Y, and Z and bring it back to me, I'll be happy to sign it. But this is what's called a bicameral legislation. I told you everybody that works on this side of the building over here represents the crown. They were appointed by the crown to do that. So that's what this side of the building represents. But everybody on this side of the building is an elected official elected by the people. So that's what that side of the building represents. People represented there, crown represented there. House of Lords, House of Commons. It's our version of British Parliament over here on this side of the water. But they have the right to say no. All right, and if they say no and they find at a point where they can't agree, well, they're going to have to find a way to compromise. They're going to have to find a place to meet. In the middle, exactly. It's not just expression. They were very literal back in the 18th century. So this room, the Joint Council Chamber, is a place for both sides to literally come and meet in the middle and sort out their differences.
In our next and final video in the Colonial Williamsburg series, we come back in the evening for fireworks and fife and drums in what's called the Grand Illumination. Now we can find a restaurant at the end of the afternoon. As always, keep smiling and be kind to those you meet.